Welcome back to Catholic Cinema Crusade. I'm Nick Olzik.
I'm Violet Olzik.
And today is episode 50, and we are doing the new film Dogman, so stick around.
Why don't you start us off with prayer?
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Lord, thank you for all the blessings in our life, especially the entertainment and media that we rejoice in and we learn from. We especially we ask the Lord to bless our Holy Father, Pope Francis, as he battles some health problems. Let his healing light come upon him. And bless all of our viewers as well with all of any ailments that they have during this wintry season. And thank you for all the blessings in our life. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment to Catholic Cinema Crusade at gmail.com. And if you put a comment, we might read and talk about it on air.
So now we're going to talk about what we've been watching. And I've already knocked out one of my 5 anticipated movies of the year, haven't I?
Yes, you have. What did you see?
I took our oldest son to go see Captain America: Brave New World.
And how was it?
So I did want to look at the reviews because I didn't want to go to it if it was going to be terrible. You know, I didn't want to spend the money if it was going to be bad. But I didn't want to miss it if it was going to be good. So I checked the reviews, and the reviews were all, like, the audience score was, like, in the 70s, 80s.
Yeah, they seem to be kind of all over the place.
Yeah, so I'm like, well, okay, this is worth watching, right? This is worth watching.
Right. Oh.
Just a fair warning. So I didn't know this before I went and saw it. You need to see the Captain America Winter Soldier series. You got to go all the way back and watch The Incredible Hulk. And you got to watch The Eternals, which I heard was not very good. And obviously the movie was fine without me having done all that, but if you like to be prepared for these kinds of things, that's what you should watch.
Okay, good. So the next thing we're watching is Holy Marvels on the History Channel. We talked about this last time. They had an episode about apocalypses. So you had the Mayan calendar, you had the Book of Revelation. I really liked how they talked about the Cave of the Apocalypse, where John had his revelation. You can even find like the place where he like laid his head when God spoke to him, and he had this revelation. They had a nice outlay of it. It was a really good explanation.
Yeah, they're really good at doing that kind of thing on the show.
Yeah, they're good at explaining it. It's always entertaining. They talked about the Spear of Destiny, which I didn't know had one of the true nails in it. I knew the Spear of Destiny, was the lance, supposedly. That was put in Jesus' side. But I didn't know that they had then also put one of the nails into the Spear of Destiny, which was kind of cool. So yeah, it's a great series. We're continuing to go through it. I would encourage people to watch it. And then lastly, we're going to talk about, we're not sure if we're going to do a whole podcast on this, but we saw the Amy Schumer comedy, in quotation marks, Kind of Pregnant, which honestly I saw purely because when they came out with the trailer, like 2 weeks before the premiere, it just got an insane amount of hate online. Just a really devastatingly large amount of hate, which really kind of was like, okay, why are you hating on this comedy for some reason? I know a lot of people don't like Amy Schumer, but it was very intriguing to me. Like, why do people hate this so much? So I wanted to watch the film mostly for that.
Yeah, watch it. Amy Schumer is not very funny. She's one of the most overrated female comedians ever. Like, people act like she's hilarious, but there are plenty of other comedian women who are much funnier than she is.
I'll add one caveat to that. If you go back and you see, like, mid-2010 Inside Amy Schumer, like the first 2 seasons, it's decent. It's not spectacular, but there's some good things there. Like, they did this skit based on 12 Angry Men, which was kind of funny. Once she kind of left that show and started doing stand-up, she got very scatological And then she really turned me off, and I was not that interested. So I would agree with you, like 75%.
She was terrible when she hosted the Oscars.
Yeah, she did not do very well in that. She made a film called Trainwreck, which was right around that time. That was okay. Like, it had some good humor. There were some things I liked about it. That review's online if you want to check that out. But yeah, especially like the last 5 or 6 years, she has not done a lot of good work. And unfortunately, this film was just another example of her not doing good work. I don't know if I would say it's as bad as all the backlash said it was, but it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. It was weird because I had hoped, so she, in the years since, she got married and had a child, and so now you have a film about her, you know, being pregnant, or trying to be, wishing she was pregnant. So I thought, okay, maybe she's matured a little bit. She's going to have some situational humor about pregnancy, which there are great bits about pregnancy that have been done. Jim Gaffigan does a lot, you know, that sort of thing.
I Love Lucy, obviously, the best.
Well, I was saving that for the end, but I'll tell you, the 10 seconds in the episode where she has to go to the hospital, where she has to get off the couch and she has to figure out how to do this, and she ends up like standing on the table and like propping herself. Those 10-15 seconds are far funnier than this entire movie.
Yeah, the entire movie.
Like, that bit, I mean, she's just so good in general, but that bit, I mean, that's great pregnancy humor. That's something every woman who's been pregnant can relate to and understand. But this, it was just constant anatomy humor.
It was the same joke like
gross.
20 times.
It was, one of the things that also kind of bothered me was, okay, Schumer is famous for not just being, you know, a gross out female comic, but being, you know, a very staunch feminist comic, you know, politically. And again, I was hoping, okay, she's had a kid. Maybe she's trying to appeal a little bit more to families. So they do portray having a family in a positive light somewhat, but it's very clear every pregnancy is a woman's choice. Every pregnancy has to be deliberate. It has to be wanted. And there's all these, like, they don't talk about abortion very much, but every time it's mentioned, there's this classic, like, Seinfeld line. So there, you know, there's an episode called The Outing where people think, Jerry and George are gay, but they're not actually gay. And every time they try to tell someone we're not gay, they always end with this line, not that there's anything wrong with that. And they literally say that, like, twice in this movie, where they say, you know, I chose to have a baby, not an abortion. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Like, they literally say that. And it was so annoying. I was like, you actually said the line.
If you have to say that, then maybe there is something wrong with that.
Anyhow, it was just really annoying. Because, again, they're trying to have this more family, I won't say family-friendly, family-oriented humor, but she's still, you know, still allied with the cause, we'll just say of that. And it just discolors the rest of what she's trying to do. And even apart from that, it just wasn't funny. The jokes didn't land. And I did notice, like, the 2 times in the film I laughed, it was because there was a funny, awkward situation that had nothing to do with, like, gross out humor. That was just kind of funny because something happened that was unexpected. And, you know, she's also a teacher, and she's a terrible teacher, and she does things that you could easily get fired for multiple times in a day. And it's just, it was a bizarre movie, and it was trying to do things, none of which panned out, and it just wasn't funny. It was so unfunny. And aggressively unfunny, and I was disappointed. I was hopeful, but I was disappointed.
Yeah.
So today we're talking about Dogman, which is based on a comic series from Dan Peekleave of Captain Underpants fame. Now, Dogman, as Violet can attest, is a legendary figure in my household. This was easily the most anticipated film since the Super Mario Brothers movie back in 2023. And I would say overall, it was well worth the wait. It was very faithful to the spirit of the books. It was super fun. And if you get that reference, you've read Dogman before. It might seem a little strange or even dull to the uninitiated, but I absolutely loved it. Now, full disclosure, I saw this film with my kids. Violet did not see the film, but she is aware of the books, so, she can comment on that. So let's start just with the basic story. Now, Dogman, to be blunt, is kind of a weird idea for a story. So it's about this cop named Officer Knight, and then he has a dog named Greg, and together they're this super cop dog team because Officer Knight is a great kung fu master, very agile but not particularly bright, but Greg the dog is very bright, though his body is infested with fleas and he's a dog, kind of a Wallace and Gromit situation. And they have this nemesis in this evil genius cat named Petey, who plants a bomb, it blows up, they both are sent to the hospital, and we learn that Officer Knight's head is dying, and Greg the dog's body is dying, so they take Greg's head, they put it on Officer Knight's body, and thus creates Dogman. And this creates no ethical dilemmas whatsoever, or present any kind of strange spiritual difficulties. Everyone just kind of goes with it. And if you accept that basic premise, which honestly, it's a silly 8-year-old style kids comic, you can get along with that, then it's fine. So we have this super cop named Dogman who fights crime and, takes care of evil and that sort of thing. This is all premised on the fact that this is a comic book written by the characters from Captain Underpants, George and Harold. So, in the film, and one of the things that we'll talk more about this later, one of the things I wasn't crazy about is they actually tried to combine the first 3 books into the one movie, so it gets going really quick and it doesn't really stop. It kind of flounders in the first half, although it gets better in the second.
When I heard that there was the little fish, Flappy, and little Petey, I was very confused because those stories they just don't go together.
Yeah,
they're just completely different stories.
So it starts with the basic premise of the first book, which is Petey, who's out to get Officer Knight and Officer Greg, but ends up creating Dogman, the superhero. And the first half of the film is just Petey trying all these schemes, like a giant vacuum cleaner, like a tank that shoots tennis balls to fight against Dogman, but of course, Dogman foils him again and again and again. The midpoint is when Petey tries to clone himself, so now we're entering into the second book, and he creates little Petey, who is nothing like him in any way. He's genetically an identical cat, but he's a kitten, so he's like a kid. So now Petey has a son, sort of. But his personality is very positive and optimistic and not evil at all. When that doesn't work out, so he actually ends up abandoning Lil Petey, which is really actually sad. Like in the movie and in the books, it's kind of shocking that he just abandons this kid. But of course, the kid finds Dogman and they strike up a friendship, and Dogman basically becomes an adoptive father, and he goes and lives with him. And when that plan doesn't work, he finds, and I'm going to go through this slowly, a evil psychic fish that's dead, but they take him to a living spray factory. So it's a factory that makes a spray that when you spray on something, it comes alive. So like when they spray it on a building, it becomes a giant building monster.
Sounds a lot like shark repellent.
Kind of, yes. So they spray this on this evil psychic fish who comes back to life, and he then supersedes Petey, this is Flippy, as the main villain. So there's all this craziness going on. It has characters from 3 different books, kind of all rolled into one. So again, the first half is kind of slow getting going, but then it hits the gas, and the last, third of the film is just totally insane and chaotic. You have all these characters. You have several villains, some of whom then become on the good guy's side against the other bad guys, and it's nuts. It's crazy. So I wasn't honestly all that crazy about the plot and the story. I thought that was easily the worst part. But the animation is gorgeous. last year you had The Wild Robot, which was absolutely phenomenal in its animation. Here you have Dogman, which looks much cruder and simpler, but because it's supposed to be like a comic book written by an 8-year-old, works perfectly. Like the lines on the buildings are dashed like an 8-year-old would do, and just the way that things move, like it's wonderful how they brought these books to life. They look exactly like I would imagine an 8-year-old would draw them as, with squiggly lines and consummate V's or angry eyes like on the buildings, vibrant colors, and characters that are combinations of different things. I mean, the mise-en-scène is absolutely fantastic. And they play a lot with the diegetic elements in a really cool way. So, like, there's one moment where Petey, so he's a dog, right? He's kind of at his house. He's alone. So Officer Knight had a girlfriend who, of course, left him when he became a half man, half dog. Because he's
of course.
I can't really say I blame her, to be honest. So he's alone now at his house, which is basically like the TARDIS because it's a doghouse, but you go inside and it's like 3 stories and there's like a couch and all this sort of stuff. But Dogman's kind of sad, and so he howls at the moon as dogs do, and because it's, like a comic book, as he howls, it makes these like red O's that come out of his mouth, and the red O's float up to the city skyline. They float across the city, and then it goes to Petey's headquarters, and they start banging against the wall, these red O's. And he sees it, and he opens the window, and he goes, "Cut it out, dog!" And then one of the O's, like, hits him in the face. So it's little things like that that are just really, really clever. Reminded me of, like, a lot of the jokes in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Right, yeah.
Just playing with the diegetic elements and the fact these are comic book characters and just having a lot of... It's a very immersive world. This is a strange analogy, but it's probably the most immersive world since Dune Part 2, just in terms of how everything fits and everything is just a really creative mise-en-scène that has this logical consistency to it, even though it's very crazy. And again, the books are just like that, so it was a wonderful adaptation. Now, thematically, it was a little disconnected. It has those basic values that classic animation from like the 90s and the noughties had, like bravery and, saving your friends. It brings it up a little bit, especially with little Petey being abandoned and Dogman takes it in and they kind of strike up this friendship because, again, little Petey is supposed to be like evil because he's the clone of Petey, but Dogman takes him in anyway. There are basic values like kindness and self-sacrifice. There's a really beautiful moment towards the end of the film where the one thing that Greg still has from his time as a dog is this ball that Officer Knight gave him that has his name on it, and it's kind of his blanket the whole film. He cuddles up with it, and it's a reminder of his former life. And at the very end of the film, he has to throw the ball and get rid of it in order to save Lil Petey, and he doesn't really want to do it, but finally he does it. It's this great little moment. Again, it's a very common sort of trope in animation. It reminds me of like when, again, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, when Bob Haskins like dumps out the alcohol and gets rid of it. That sort of thing. The one thing that I think parents might be a little annoyed is, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but towards the end of the film, Petey, the original villain, realizes his mistake and teams up with Dogman to fight against the evil psychotic fish. And I know there's a trope, especially in recent animation, where everyone gets redeemed, where there's not really any bad guys. There's just people have had trauma in their past, or like, people who were bullied as a kid and now they're this and that. But I actually think this handled it pretty well. For one thing, you still have the evil psychotic fish who is clearly evil and unredeemable. Although in the books, he also gets redeemed. But at the same time, I think it is important for children especially to see that you can do bad and then turn good, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Like you can, as the way Fred Rogers says, you can stop when you want to. Like people get mad, people do bad things, but you can stop and turn it around. As long as there are consequences for doing bad things, contrition and forgiveness, I think, is actually really important. And so if you have a bad guy who faces the consequences and then turns around, I think that can actually be really positive. That's different from simply everybody's nice and everything works out in the end, and the villain, we just automatically say whatever you do is fine. That's not what you have here. And I think that is an important lesson for children.
Yeah, you need both. You need the, like, dynamic between good and evil so that they understand that dynamic. But you're right, they also need to know that they're redeemable, right? That it's okay for them to do bad things and then have contrition and take responsibility and all that.
I liked how they handled that. And this is just another example. So this is from DreamWorks. Last year, DreamWorks had actually 2 animated movies in my top 10. It had Orion in the Dark, and it had The Wild Robot, which is actually my number 1 film of last year. And what's really interesting watching this is when DreamWorks started out, we remember this, in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was kind of the odd cousin of Disney, right? Jeffrey Katzenberg left Disney and wanted to make kind of edgier stuff, and so you had Ants, and you had Shrek, and you had... these kind of off-color... Like, I remember they had one about a snail, like Turbo or something. Just,
Oh, yeah.
They're just kind of weird off-brand things. But especially lately, I feel like they've actually been doing better than Disney. We've talked in the past about Disney's identity crisis over the last 10 years or so. So I don't want to belabor that. But while Disney's been going through that, I feel like DreamWorks has actually hit kind of a nice stride.
Yeah.
The last couple of years, they've really been putting out good material.
Did they
you had
do
The
the
Last
Bad Guys?
Wish. What?
Did they do The Bad Guys?
They did The Bad Guys, which is really good. They did
You're right,
The Last Wish.
The Last Wish was just amazing.
Who would have thought Puss in Boots 2? Okay, you have Puss in Boots, which itself is a spin-off of Shrek.
Right.
And then you have the sequel to that, and it's like one of the best animated films of the decade. Like, I was shocked at how good Puss in Boots 2 was. Like, genuinely, like, oh my goodness, this is an existential film with a panic attack and characters who are deep and meaningful, and you have this cat that's declawed and it, like, traumatizes her. And then you have this grotesque villain who really is evil to his core, and then you
really
have
creepy.
Death. Like, it was insane how good that film was.
And we totally would have passed it over, except my mom took the kids to see it. She's
Right.
like, you have to see it.
Oh, so good.
Like,
she was so right. But yeah, this is just another example of how DreamWorks is really putting out great stuff. We have Bad Guys 2 coming out later this year, so I'm looking forward to that. Definitely going to go see that. So Dogman, it's not a masterpiece, but what I really loved about Dogman, it's a great example of a great adaptation.
Yeah.
It's easy to look at examples of the books were really good and the movie was terrible, but every once in a while you get something that really hits the feel. To Kill a Mockingbird, I think, is the best example of this, where you have an absolutely outstanding book become an absolutely outstanding film that is nonetheless on its own a great movie, even if you hadn't read the book. And I think this is true of this. It's not as good as To Kill a Mockingbird, but it's a very faithful adaptation to the kind of the tone and the theme. It was a really fun movie. All my kids loved it. They thought it was fantastic. So, of course, my son, who's the Dogman obsessed, he loved it. He thought it was great. Although he was very disappointed there wasn't a nice, fancy popcorn tin that he could bring.
Little one.
There was a little one, which I was happy about because it came with like a snack pack food. It was a lot cheaper. But it had a little one, which is fine. But I really loved it. And I'm looking forward when it comes on streaming so that, Violet, you can see it because I think you'll like it too.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounded like the biggest flaw was smashing 3 books together.
Right.
So the Little Petey, that's the second book, right?
That's the second book, right. And then Flippy, I don't think, shows up to the third book.
One. Yeah. So it sounds like it would have been a tight, solid story if it was just the first 2 books.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if they hadn't tried to I think what happened was they wanted Petey to have the arc.
Right.
Where he started out as the villain and then teamed up with Dogman. But in order to do that, you got to get Flippy in there.
Right, and you got to set up Flippy. You can't just throw Flippy.
It would have been better
audience.
if you could still have the arc, but he just turns good at the very end. Like, he realizes he did something wrong by abandoning his clone son. And then he goes to jail, but then obviously you can have him break out of jail, which is another theme in Dogman, is that Petey's always breaking out of jail anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think if they had stuck to the first 2 books, if it was just the first book, I think it honestly would have been a little bit hard to get across.
I mean, it's a chapter book, but they're graphic novels. So
Right.
it's like, even though it's, fairly thick and normal size for a chapter book, they're graphic novels.
Right.
They're really
they
fast.
Go
They're
very,
really short.
I mean, Nathan, we bought the latest one, the Red Shredder, or what is it called?
Yeah.
Has the word red in the title.
Yeah.
He read it in like 20 minutes. He just sat down and read the whole thing cover to cover, which is fine. It's what it's for. But yeah, putting 3 books together was just kind of hard. And I'll point this out too. The film's still 89 minutes with 3 books. So it's still a very tight film. Like, it's not a
But
a
it sounds like
long
it was
film.
too...
It was too much.
Too
if
hurried.
they did, you're right. If they did 2 books, I feel like it would have been a much tighter story. And then they would have had more fodder for sequels, which I'm sure will come anyway.
Yeah,
but,
well, I mean, there's like over a dozen books.
Yeah.
So either way, they have plenty of, but maybe in the future they'll think, oh, 2 books instead of 3 books.
Yep. So I recommend it. It was a good film. In January and February is usually when studios put out their not so great films. And we've already talked about a couple, and we'll probably talk about a couple still, but it was nice to have a good January film that was a solid hit. So.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
How did it compare to the Captain Underpants movie?
I liked it better than the Captain Underpants movie. It's for slightly younger kids.
Okay.
Captain Underpants movie was fine. It's actually been a while, so I'm trying to remember. I will say the one thing I remember very excitedly is the theme song was by Weird Al Yankovic, which was just awesome and amazing. I remember liking the Captain Underpants movie. I thought it was fine. I will say the Captain Underpants series on Netflix, the traditional 2D anime one, is kind of gross. I'm not a big fan of that one. But the movie was... I think this was a little bit better than the movie. I feel like if it was better, I would have remembered it more.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. And we'll be happy to put that comment on the show. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.